Welcome to the Nano podcast. I'm your host, Will Chernlin, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey through the world of nano-cap companies. For the past decade, I've talked to thousands of business owners across various industries. It's been an enlightening experience revealing the vast tapestries of entrepreneurship and innovation that thrives beneath the surface of mainstream media coverage. Each week, I will interview different leaders of nano-cap publicly traded companies to learn about their history, what they do now, and their future. As a reminder, none of this information is financial advice, and it is all for entertainment purposes only. Let's start this week's episode. Hi everyone, today we have Ryan Marthaler of Nuwellis, stock ticker NUWE. Nuwellis is a medical device company that develops, manufactures, and commercializes medical devices used in ultrafiltration therapy. Ryan, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
So Ryan, I see you're Minnesota, born and bred, went to Carlson, got your MBA there, and then started working at big companies like Medtronic and such. When you were in college, were you planning on going kind of the biotech medical angle the whole time, or what were you thinking when you were in business school at first, and what you wanted to do?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I've had a lifelong love of biology. So that was my initial dream when I was just a teenager, to be a biologist. But as I actually got into learning more about it, I realized I'd be spending my life at a bench, and I wanted to be more active on the business side. So that's what eventually led me to get my MBA, and I wanted to focus in medtech. Obviously, you're combining great business angle and also the biology angle as well, and it's just been a great career for me throughout this time.
Yeah, so a lot of people have obviously heard of Silicon Valley, but not as many people have heard of Medical Alley.
Yeah.
And kind of what is going on in Minnesota with the Mayo Clinic, Medtronic, and then all those spin-off companies that supply these large kind of Fortune maybe 100 corporations type of thing. Tell me a little bit more about kind of the ecosystem and you bopping around different jobs around the Twin Cities and kind of what you learned from each and what kind of made you more excited for the next one.
Yeah, no, that's great. So like you said, this is a vibrant scene for med device and med tech, right? And it really goes back to the core elements that we have here in Minnesota, really, really high or strong degree of education and sciences and really strong businesses. And then eventually people who are in those strong businesses or academia who want to have their own entrepreneurial streak and want to spin out and create their own business. So it's just a very, very healthy ecosystem in that way. And for me personally, I've done a lot of that scene myself. So like you mentioned, after I got my MBA, I worked at Medtronic for a good long stretch, almost 8 years, in one business that was more of that entrepreneurial early stage or emerging business within remote patient monitoring, and that in one of Medtronic's larger vascular businesses as well. So it's just such a great experience, that really that strategic business, strategic marketing sense from one of those large corporations, and then jump over to a company like Nuwellis, which is emerging, which has a really great technology and a really great long-term vision, but needs that early commercialization to get going and get traction in the marketplace.
Similar to Silicon Valley, do you notice in the Minnesota kind of ecosystem that when someone does get an exit, say sells their company to Medtronic, that one of their kind of first moves with their cash is to angel invest into other companies that have med tech, and that it kind of becomes this like community of people that once you win, that you try to make everyone else win?
Yeah, absolutely. The nail on the head. You see that all the time. People who are just serial investors in entrepreneurship in this space. And I think that's one of the things that makes Minneapolis and Minnesota really special is it's very, very difficult to replicate that type of ecosystem where you have the big companies, you have the little companies, you have academia all working together, and everybody just really, really oriented to how do we deliver great innovation that improves a wide spectrum of patient outcomes across the board.
So you've worked in your career, you work at these very large companies, and then you start hearing about through your network, Nuwellis.
Mm-hmm.
What initially got you excited about it? Was it that you're kind of sick of the bureaucracy of these huge corporations and you just wanted to roll up your sleeves and just kind of get something done? Was it the opportunity was too good to let up? Or was there the combination of patents plus funding where you go, hey, someone needs to do this, someone's going to do this, why not me?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably say it's more the latter. So I had always wanted to jump into an earlier stage company, but for me personally, I also wanted to get that big company experience too, because I knew that that would be another, great learning experience to make me even stronger at a company like Nuwellis. So when I was looking at making that transition from the strategic to the early stage or emerging company, I was very, very specific in looking for a technology that actually worked, that had some traction, and that didn't have as many of the core barriers that you see with some early stage technology. So I was really lucky to find Nuwellis, which has this technology that works so well for what it does in removing fluid with patients, but just really needed more of that strong commercial strategy to help it get there, to help it get to the next level.
So, in your own words, what is Nuwellis, and what do you mean by when you say someone has too much fluids?
Yeah, well, that's a really getting to the heart of the matter here. So what Nuwellis does is currently we offer one therapy that does just that. So patients across the spectrum of conditions and diseases can accumulate too much fluid. And often what happens in that situation is the doctor will prescribe diuretic medications, which work great when they work, but a lot of times they don't. Either they do complete fluid removal or they just don't do it at all because the kidneys are so overtaxed from the medication. So what we do is we come in and essentially work in a lot of ways like a mechanical diuretic and allow doctors to very safely and very precisely remove the fluid and salt from the patient that is needed to get them decongested and on their energy recovery.
And so, is there a medical condition that people have, or is it just like kind of chronic kidney disease that causes this? Is it old age, or can you be 18 years old and you just can't expel liquids for one reason?
All of the above, really. I mean, of course, you see it more with the older folks who have multi-morbid conditions, heart failure. I think heart failure is probably the one that's easiest for people to understand. It really gets to what we call the cardiorenal syndrome, where it's working as well, so fluid backs up to the kidneys, so they don't work as well, and it becomes this downward spiral essentially to the emergency room where the patient is just holding more and more water, and it needs to be removed. But like I said, it also shows up in a wide spectrum of conditions and diseases for patients. So heart failure, like we talked about, but it can be post-surgery, it can be cancer, it can be trauma, it can be burn. You get a lot of pediatric patients who, for different reasons, don't have kidneys that function well, and they need that extra help. And they also need a therapy that's gentle and safe that can precisely remove that fluid. And that's really our sweet spot.
So you mentioned it as a therapy, but I would love for you to elaborate a little bit more. This is not a pill or a shot. This is an actual machine and so what made you all confident in that the idea that the solution to this is not something like a diuretic, but it is something that's mechanical?
Yeah, no, I really like that question. So one of the things that's really important here is thinking about, a diuretic medication. You take that, but you don't know what response you're going to get. A lot of the times it works really well if your system is receptive to the medication, but many times it won't for whatever reason. So what happens with all those patients who, it's not working well? Well, that's really where we step in and with our technology, which is, in a way, quite simple. It's essentially a pump that's filtering blood through a special filter that removes excess water and excess electrolytes in a balance proportional to the blood. So essentially, instead of taking a pill and hoping that it works, you can actually put the patient on the machine that we have and get a very, very controlled removal of that fluid and get the patient back to recovery.
So is this machine, is it similar to like dialysis where someone who has chronic kidney conditions may come once a week to get kind of their fluids drained? Or is this they show up to the emergency room and they go, what is going on with this person? They go, looks like sodium levels are way too high. They said they haven't gone to the bathroom in 2 days. We need to get them on this machine. What's more likely kind of use case?
So this therapy does sit sort of in the family of renal replacement therapies, right? So it would be closer to CRRT devices than diuretic medications, certainly. But what we do is we do a much more in sort of a spectrum of uh, strength and power within kidney replacement. We do the simpler, more focused therapy on fluid removal, where renal replacement therapies are also doing certain things to cleanse the blood. So I like to think of it, we're sort of in the middle of the spectrum of the options that clinicians and doctors have, whereas diuretic medications are sort of the earlier stage in therapy of trying to get the patient to be decongested. Whereas if they get too severely overloaded, they oftentimes end up going on a dialysis program. Well, we can sit in the middle where before the patient gets so impacted in their kidneys, we can step in with our therapy and get the fluid off and sort of prevent that escalation to the more complex therapy of CRRT and renal replacement.
And it's waste, right? You don't clean it and then put it back in. It's just expelled and then you're done with it.
Yes, really just removing that excess water and the excess electrolytes that go in proportion with that water. And that's one of the key differentiators we have with diuretic medications too. It's a lot of times you can get into electrolyte imbalances, just the nature of how these medications work, right? They're not pulling things off of proportion. They tend to overindex on strictly H2O. Whereas, like I said, again, we pull off everything in balance and help patients bring their electrolyte balance.
So what's the plan moving forward? Is it open up a bunch of dialysis type things and kind of go follow the business model of a DaVita or something like that? Is it to sell to a bunch more hospitals? Is it just once people find out that this solution exists, they can't help but buy it, but you just need to get it in front of more people? Or is there a version 2 that's coming down the pipeline that you go, okay, once everyone gets this one's only $1,000. People might even have it in their households. Like, what's kind of the plan?
Yeah, I'd say it's a multi-front commercial expansion, right? So our roots, our legacy are in heart failure. But what we've been doing over the last 5 years is really rapidly expanding within cardiac surgery, post-cardiac surgery, the ICU and intensivist stage, and then also pediatrics as well. So what we're doing right now from a commercial front is ensuring that we are building that awareness because we're newer in cardiac surgery and pediatrics and pushing out our message as much as possible to get more sites up and running. And we're seeing a lot of success in that area. Along with that, we are, like you hinted, we are thinking of the future as well. We are on a path to become a multi-portfolio company. And if you look, for instance, in our investor deck, we'll talk about a recent acquisition of Rendiatech that allows us to do AKI injury monitoring with urine output. And we are also looking at eventually launching a pediatric CRRT device, which will do multifactorial or multimodal therapies for very, very young patients, but do it in a very safe, gentle way like we have with our legacy product, Oncodex.
Awesome. Well, what kind of gets you excited about this? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What about this is kind of like what you want to be working on? Like you've seen a million different medical solutions and technologies over the last couple of decades. Why is this the one that you wanted to say, hey, this is where I want to spend my time?
Yeah, I think it comes down to it's deceptively simple, right? What we're doing is just allowing physicians to have this really controlled way to remove that fluid from patients rather than having this guesswork of diuretics or going all the way up to CRRT, which can be in a lot of ways overpowered for what the patient actually needs. So there's a clear middle zone where this therapy is highly efficacious and can get enormous traction in the marketplace. And in a lot of ways, what we need to do is just push our commercial machine forward and get a stronger push out there to raise awareness and raise use for therapy.
Yeah, it seems like something where a doctor, if they had it in the hospital and then they move to a different hospital that doesn't have it, that they would demand it immediately.
We do see that. Especially when physicians go from some of our larger, more successful accounts, and then they go to wherever they may go. We do very often see them taking the therapy and insisting on it, especially in our cardiac surgery and pediatric spaces. It's such a critical tool in the arsenal once physicians learn about it and get some use cases under their belt that it really becomes indispensable to that.
Yeah, since it is, like, from my opinion, such a no-brainer, especially for that there's kind of, even if it only happens to 1% of patients, it's still good to have a machine there just in case type of thing.
Yeah.
What is the biggest hurdle from the hospitals buying it? Is it they just don't know it exists? Is it that it costs too much money? Or is it that the training involved to use the machine is something that they don't have yet?
I think it's a combination of simple awareness, which sounds kind of shocking, right? This is relatively simple technology, but if you haven't been pushing the message out as we have been in the last few years, then it's going to take more to get that awareness built. Along with that, I mean, as we all often hear, the simple capital improvement or approval process within a hospital can take some effort and can take some handholding, but we're very well versed in supporting our clinicians who want to do this. And then I think from there, once it's in the hospital and the system, it's ensuring that we have our clinical presence to make sure the nurses are supported and well trained, and that's what we do as well, to make sure that this isn't a drive-by, here's your technology and good luck to you. We are offering very consistent support and ongoing training for the nurses so they feel comfortable in adopting the technology.
Yeah, and how is that broken up responsibility-wise, where you have someone who enters in the hospital, kind of makes maybe the initial, and then there's someone else who comes in and closes the sale, then there's someone who comes in and trains them in, or kind of what kind of sales team do you need for something like this?
Yeah, at the end of the day, what we're really doing is setting up a program within a facility. This isn't, the same as putting an implantable in a patient, that type of thing. This is an active program which needs active engagement. So you sort of got to it. We have sales reps who go in and do the initial prospecting and working with champion physicians and supporting physicians to get momentum for the therapy in the facility. And once that has been approved, then our clinical specialists come in and do some very intensive, well-rounded training with the nurses and the physicians to make sure that everyone is comfortable with how the therapy works, the right patients to identify, and from there. And what we do from there, after we get established, say we start in a heart failure clinic, then we look to branch out. Then we look at what's going on in cardiac surgery, what's going on in pediatric, what's going on in the ICU generally, and how do we get the therapy in front of those teams as well, and let them know about all the benefits that Opulence offers.
Do you ever get to be there personally during kind of the light bulb moment where you make the sales pitch and the light bulb goes off in their head and they go, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we've been looking for, something in this middle ground? Do you ever get to sit there and do you just sit back and just kind of smile and go, yup?
I do. It's amazing how often you see that. And I think that's probably one of the more fun things about being in a company with an emerging technology is what you described, that light bulb moment where you talk about the technology, you talk about what it can do, you talk about the unique patient fit or the patient need that's maybe not been met yet. And then you see the surgeon or the nurse go, wait a minute, we have a patient on, who's on in the bed right now. This would be great for. Well, only we had it today. And so when that light bulb goes off, that's when the momentum really happens in an account and you see it move forward quickly.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate you're not like the old encyclopedia sales guy where you can just go in your trunk and get him the machine right then and there.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So as we wrap up here, what does the next 5 years look like for Nuwellis? Where do you see kind of some leaps and bounds if everything goes right?
Yeah, I think there's two areas I want to highlight for you. And one being first our commercial engine, which is more robust than I've ever seen it in the over 3 years I've been here. So we have a super strong sales and clinical team spread throughout the country, very well trained people, experts in device sales, experts in the clinical use of the therapy. So the table is set. The table is set from a commercial growth engine, and that's super exciting to me. On the other side of it is more the future looking activities, and I mentioned some of these as well, but we are very actively thinking about our pipeline and what the transition from a product to a portfolio company will look like for us, really centered in what we talked about a little bit earlier about the cardiorenal syndrome and how we can help clinicians in that zone. So we have, again, the AKI monitor technology that's coming in the near term, and our pediatric device, which is coming a little bit after that. But we don't stop there. We're also thinking more white space ideas as well, where we can take the pieces of these technologies and build something greater. So pay attention. There's a lot of exciting things coming here.
Oh, that's very, very exciting. So as we wrap up, if people want to hear a little bit about Nuwellis, want to learn more about it, where should I send my audience?
Yeah, certainly. We just launched a new website that tells a really great version of the story there for clinicians, investors, everyone involved. So Nuwellis.com, go there, learn more, and stay tuned for exciting things to come there as well.
Yeah, and a fun thing on Nuwellis' website is that there's actual metrics with ROI of hospitals who actually make money by getting your product and making sure that they have the Aqueducts and such, which is unlike almost any biotech website I've ever been on. And so that's kind of cool that you guys can actually show that right away. So Ryan, thanks again for coming on the show. Thanks for everything you do to make people's lives a little bit more comfortable. And for those of you still listening, please remember to subscribe and review. Thanks.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not provide financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or any offer to buy or sell any securities or to make any investment. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement therefore by NanoCap Podcast or its affiliates. The NanoCap Podcast Express disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this podcast.